everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel Ray, and today is a much anticipated video. It is Theory Tuesday, where we talk about all the weird and wacky with Mr. Ray.
Hooray!
Hey, Mr. Ray.
How's it going?
Today we're going to continue. Is this the part 1 or part 2?
I think this is part 1.
Technically, this is part 1. Last one was the intro.
And we're gonna get into it.
We are going to get into it, but before we do, I am going to be diamond painting on The Ghost Maker by Diamond Shop. I have a link down below in the description. I have links for all of these things that are here that I'm using as well. But just so that you know, this pen, this beautiful hybrid pen, is from Black Wolf Woodworks. And this gorgeous infinity ring pen is from Donna Bass Pens. Links are down below as well. Muni Maitre, Patty Wax, needle minders are mine, and they'll be available on the website soon. I will let you know when that is. Let me just get this started. I'll open up a new section. Ooh, so exciting. I'm going to pull back a little bit more because there's lots of confetti, meaning there's lots of different colors in a small section.
I actually remember the technical terms, yeah. Yeah.
He's learning.
I'm learning.
And if you were wondering, this is a crafting channel where we do crafts while we talk about weird stuff on Tuesdays. So with that, I'm going to turn on my light pad. Maybe. There we go.
Ooh.
And now that'll change all the balance, so I hope that everyone doesn't mind. And let's begin.
Yeah.
Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, part 1.
Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, part 1.
Now this isn't like, are there physical skinwalkers at the Pentagon at this point?
I don't know.
Okay.
Do you mean the entity known as the Skinwalker?
Yes.
I don't know if one of them is going to be at the actual Pentagon.
Such a misleading title.
I think, yeah, I mean, but it really grabs your attention. It does grab the
attention, sure does.
Yeah. So I suppose, because one of the things that we were talking about before when we were reading the original, when I was reading the original Skinwalker book and talking to you about it, was that I was amazed at how many like luminaries from the UFO world were involved in it.
Yes.
Like so many big names, you know?
Also, we have a playlist with those videos in it if you want to go check it out.
And you were getting overwhelmed with all the names.
I was.
And I
There's
was
a lot of people in this.
I can't believe you don't know who these people are, you know?
I mean...
And...
How could I not?
But yeah, but like, I guess I didn't really expect you to know either. Like, but, you know, it's just amazing to me that, like, these guys are such... Because part of what it is as well is that, like, there's a whole UFO ecosystem. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like within anything. And like previously, because we were talking about this, previously you would have had to like subscribe to a magazine and write someone a letter, you know? And now like literally any of the names that I mentioned here, you can go and Google them with podcast and you will find them on podcasts all over the place all day long.
Yeah.
Like hours and hours and hours of them, you know, talking. And the other thing I was saying as well is that like UFO people are really bad at being succinct, you know?
No.
Like all of the podcasts are like 4 or 5 hours long and they're wide ranging and you know what I mean? Everything is everything,
yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think...
So what did you do for us?
I read the book and I think that having the book digitally, because when I was reading Skinwalker, it was The Hunt for the Skinwalker. It was a physical copy of the book that I had. Mm-hmm. And that's not as helpful as having it on Kindle and just being able to highlight areas and make notes.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I literally have the book. So I've read the book from the inception of this project, this advanced aerospace. Oh my god, I can't believe I don't even.
This is normal.
This is normal, yeah. Like there's so many acronyms in here that I'm going to gloss over all the acronyms, you know.
Okay.
Now, because this is UFO stuff, and you'll come into this as well with cryptid stuff and all that. Like, the entire thing is constructed out of rabbit holes. So it's very difficult to not go down a rabbit hole. Okay?
Okay.
So, and it's very difficult for us to actually get into this book without talking, and the inception of the whole program, without talking about who these characters are.
Right.
And just what big names they are in the UFO world. Mm-hmm. You know? And you remember in the introduction, I alluded to the fact that there seems to be this thing where there's ATIP and there's OSAP.
Mm-hmm.
And
those are very confusing to remember.
I suppose they are...
To those who are not reading the book along with us.
Yeah. Like, OSAP
really.
is the Advanced Aerospace... oh my god, I can't believe this is so embarrassing. So, there's a load of acronyms and... like an awful lot of acronyms. Mm-hmm. So the ones that we'll be dealing with are OSAP. And OSAP is the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Applications Program.
Say that again?
It is the Advanced Aerospace Weapons,
mm-hmm.
okay? Systems Application Program.
Okay.
But I will be referring to it as OSAP.
Naturally. OSAP.
OSAP. And OSAP was run by Bigelow Aerospace, you know?
Okay.
And it was run by a specific entity within Bigelow Aerospace that was set up to run this whole thing, to run this contract for the government.
Okay.
And that is the Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, or BAS.
BAS. Got it. Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
There are, like, literally 150 million acronyms in here, you know?
We're not going to go over them all.
We're not going to go into the acronyms.
Thank God.
And we're not going to go down the rabbit holes.
Okay.
We're just going to talk about the characters that are involved in it,
mm-hmm.
and the process of them getting this money, which was
right.
22 million in
the
defense
thing that
intelligence.
really surprised me last time.
Yeah, but like the thing about it as well is that like 22 million in Defense Intelligence Agency money to research something. I mean, it's small potatoes to these guys, really. I mean, it seems like a lot to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But to the military-industrial complex, 22 million is the change they find down the back of the couch. You know what I mean? Ugh. And I'm not saying it's an inconsequential amount of money.
No, I know.
But it's not as large a figure as you would think. So this program ran between September 2008 and December 2010. And it was 10 million in the first year, and then it was renewed again, and it was 12 million in the next year. So it was 22 million in total for 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I suppose the other thing to talk about is its relationship to ATIP,
mm-hmm.
which is there's lots of different versions of this name. It's suggested that all of the different versions of the name that were put out were to make it more difficult for people to FOIA it. So one of the versions, for instance, is like the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And then sometimes they use...
ATIF.
Well, yeah, ATIP. But ATIP is the latest branch of UFO disclosure stuff, you know? Mm-hmm. And this involves Tom DeLonge and his To the Stars Academy.
Okay.
Which also has its own acronym. But we're not going to go into that, obviously.
Okay.
But that appears as an acronym very often. So this is Tom DeLonge. It's a guy called Luis Elizondo, who was the head of the program in the Pentagon, allegedly.
We have spoken about him before.
We have. There's also a guy called Jim Simivan involved in it. Mm-hmm. There's another guy called Justice. I believe Chris Justice might be his name. He's a former head of Skunk Works at Lockheed Martin.
Skunk Works?
Yeah. You don't know what Skunk Works is?
No.
Oh, Skunk Works is
I'm just a normal person.
I know. I'm sorry. I just imagine that these things would mean something.
You have run through the rabbit holes and come back to us, James.
Skunk Works is Lockheed Martin's advanced aircraft development facility.
Okay.
And
Skunk Works.
Yeah, it's called Skunk Works. It has a logo. It's a little shield, a black shield with a Pepe Le Pew type cartoon skunk on it.
No way.
It's Skunk Works. But that's where, like, it's the comedy of its logo belies the violence of what they are developing there. You know what I mean? Stealth aircraft that carry bombs, and you know what I mean. Like, they're not messing around. Like, but anyway, that's what that is. But he's got a lot of big names with him. You know. There's people, I'll point out people in this that have worked with To the Stars Academy and this whole thing, you know?
Okay.
So they are what I would call new recipe UFO, right?
What do you mean new recipe?
I mean, they're the new guys that are coming up.
Okay.
Like Luis Elizondo, Simivan, to a certain extent, another ex-CIA guy called John Ramirez.
They're the new blood.
They're the new blood. Yeah, they're the new blood. And all of the people involved in this one are original recipe UFO guys.
Yeah.
And it's hard to overstate the people involved in this that are so big in weird science and UFOs and all of that kind of thing, you know? Mm-hmm. Do you remember any of the people that were originally in it?
Why do you quiz me?
But do you remember, like, the original writers were like Colm Kelleher and George Knapp?
Yeah, the journalist people.
Yeah, George Knapp is a journalist.
But see, I can't I wouldn't be able to say their name, but when you say them, I remember who they are, but like, I just can't.
So we're going to go through them, and we're going to talk about a dozen people that are involved in this.
Oh, goodness.
I'm going to say other people's names as well. Okay?
Okay.
But don't panic. I've actually made this very helpful conspiracy theory chart.
Y'all. All right. We're going to have this available on the screen as we're talking about it, but he literally came up with this.
It's just a little photograph of all of the people involved. This is not exhaustive. There's way more people involved in this. But like, to say that the people involved in this are like UFO royalty or weird science royalty, I think is not saying enough, really.
Okay, I'm gonna keep it up there so that I can look at this while you're explaining these people, and I will put the pictures and a link to the file so that those of you who are interested can follow along.
Okay, let's get into this.
Okay.
Now,
Part 1.
The OSAP guys.
Yeah.
Right? I'm calling them OSAP in that way, like OSAP, because they're different from the A-tip guys in that they throw so much shade at the A-tip people that none of them will ever get a suntan. I mean, the shade is incredible.
The shade is wide.
Oh my goodness, it's incredible. Like, I don't even know how to do this. Like, initially I was like, well, I'll just read the book and note the book and I'll go through the book, but it wasn't dramatic enough, so I'm doing it in different order to the book. So let's see how we get on here. Okay. So it opens up with Colm Kelleher, who is a microbiologist from Ireland.
Yes.
Who was the head of the NIDS program.
Who wrote this book.
Him, George Knapp, famous UFO journalist, and another guy called Jim Lacatski, who's a spook. Okay. Like, Jim Lacatski is such a spook that I could only find one podcast with him on it, and he wasn't even really talking. And the photograph that I have of him, I had to screen capture.
There's no Google images of him?
No, Jim Lacatski is an actual real spook.
He's under the radar.
He is 100% under the radar. So I guess it opens up, the book opens up, and Colm Kelleher is like going, oh, well, you know, it's been amazing what's happened in the last few years, you know? And he said, finally, we've been able to publish this book. And this book is remarkable in that they will finally be able to talk about all of the things they discovered during the original Skinwalker, whatchamacallit, like research program. Yeah, the original investigation. And then later again, during the refunding that they got between 2008 and 2010.
Okay.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Following you so far.
Okay. So they said that a lot of the stuff that they hinted at the last time. Do you remember a lot of the weird stuff? Like there's UFOs, there's Bigfoots, there's weird things. Interdimensional stuff.
Yeah.
There's that rift in time and space that's floating above the olive trees or whatever, the Russian olive trees at the end of the yard and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They go into that. So look, they just says like, I've got a direct quote here. The scope of the AWSAP investigation at the DIA, which were run by Bigelow Advanced Aerospace Studies, blah, 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 was much broader. Yeah, it delves into the psychic and paranormal relationship between UAPs.
Okay.
So that's what they're going to talk about in this book, you know?
Are they going to bring your one in?
Which one?
The one from the desert. What's her name?
Oh, Sandia Mountain Control people?
Yes.
I don't think she'll be involved, I'll be honest. So he goes on to talk about that for a while, you know? That, like, this is incredible that he's finally getting to talk about this.
Yeah.
You know? And they're going to finally give you the true details of just everything that happened at the ranch. Yeah? Now, as part of my research, I listened to a lot of podcasts featuring people in this. And like I said, you can Google any one of these people's names and you will come up with loads of podcasts, you know?
Yes.
Where they're just on there blathering on for hours.
Including ours.
And lots of them told stories that I was like, I recognized from the original book. And then they said, oh, well, it's in the book. And then they'll tell a different version of the story. That happened 3 times.
Wow.
And I don't know if that's going to end up in this book, or if that's the real version, or if it's just a version they're telling, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of the UFO stuff as well, like, to me, it's like WWF, you know? Mm-hmm. There's elements of kayfabe in it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, you know, where everybody, the viewer, the people involved in the WWF, all of these wrestlers, all of the people watching, everyone knows that it's for entertainment and it's fake. But you can't step on another entertainer or another performer's thing. If they carry something into the storyline, you got to go with it. There's improvisation, there's you don't break the kayfabe, like, you don't break character.
I don't understand how you could possibly believe that any of this is fake.
Well, that's the thing. Just to go into it, and we're going to get into our first 2 characters here, right?
Uh-huh.
To go into it as explaining how they got into talking about the psychic stuff and all that. Mm-hmm. Colm Kelleher references a paper written by Jacques Vallee and Eric W. Prince.
Oops.
Or Eric W. Prince, jeez. Eric Davis. Eric W. Davis.
Davis, okay.
This is Davis here. Jacques Vallee. Now...
Physicist, weird science specialist, special affinity with the phenomenon.
That's Eric Davis. That's Eric Davis, yeah.
On the NIDS team.
He's on the NIDS team. Do you remember during the first book, I came to you at one stage and I was like going, oh my God, I think this is Eric Davis. I think the physicist is Eric Davis. And you were like, who's Eric Davis? And I was like, okay, that's fair. And then I came back to you later and I was like, oh my God, they said X, Y, and Z. This is definitely Eric Davis. Well, anyway, it turns out it is definitely Eric Davis.
Ooh, it's Eric.
Let's talk about these 2 guys.
Was it Eric Davis in the library with the candlestick?
It was probably Eric Davis in the other room with a wormhole, transporting the candlestick through time and space.
Through time and space. From your kitchen to ours.
Anyway, so let's talk about these guys. We're not going down any rabbit holes here, so let's talk about these guys.
Yeah.
Like, Jacques Vallée is a French guy, okay?
Okay.
As the name would suggest.
Is he on the list?
Jacques Vallée is right here. He's on the board of news.
Stanford Research Institute, astronomer, computer scientist, UFO royalty.
Jacques Vallée is UFO royalty. Jacques Vallée is actually... Hang on, I have actual notes on this.
Wow, it's really raining.
Jacques Vallée wrote a book with J. Allen Hynek in 1975.
Wow.
Like, J. Allen Hynek and Jacques Vallée are synonymous with the UFO thing from the very start.
Okay.
Do you know? I can't imagine anybody, Vallée, Hynek, Stanton Friedman, I can't imagine anyone that is less UFO royalty than Jacques Vallée.
Okay.
Jacques Vallée is such a part of the UFO mythology that Close Encounters of the Third Kind has a French ufologist that is based on Jacques Vallée.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was 1977.
Wow.
Like, and you remember Alan Hynek appeared in that movie as well.
Was he the keyboard guy?
Do you remember I had the picture of him when we were talking about the UFO conspiracy?
That was like a year and a half ago.
Because all of this is tied into popular culture as well.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, and Vallée was talking about back in like the 70s, he published this book called like Passport to Magonia, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's like he's talking about the confluence of UFOs and folklore and mythology and stuff, which is the direction that it's gone in, really.
Yeah.
You know? Then him and Eric Davis, and he'd been talking about this for years. Davis had always been talking about weird things as well. And then they released this paper called, I'm not even going to be able to pronounce this, UFOs and the Incommensurability. Right? Okay. But people usually call this paper, and I've read this paper because I got way too into this. They usually call this paper... I went down this rabbit hole. I downloaded the paper and everything like that. And people describe it as an academic paper, but it's not really an academic. Like, it's on academic servers, but it's more like a position paper.
It's got a letterhead bush.
No, but it's more like a position paper. Like, they only have 3 or 4 academic papers in the bibliography or whatever it's called, the reference, and 2 of those are written by Vallée.
Ah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's but it's basically a position paper. And it says, usually when people talk about this particular paper, they call it the 6-layer version, you know?
The 6-layer dip.
Yeah, and it ties into something that, thing that Hynek said that, like, UFO occurrences are, you know, they come into this thing called high strangeness, you know? And high strangeness is that you get UFO occurrences, but then you get weird other things that happen to the people that have had UFO occurrences. Abduction stuff, weird experiences where they meet aliens, unusual psychic phenomenon.
Yeah.
You know? Maybe they've been told about the future, you know? Or maybe they can recall something in a dream and they wake up and they start drawing a map, you know? It's like that weird bit where all of the people that had the UFO encounter are drawn to the mountain, or, you know...
Oh, yeah, or like all the kids drew the same thing, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And this is high strangeness, that, like, the experience of a UFO itself bleeds into your other life beyond that, yeah? And that's what it is. So these 2 guys, Vallée and Davis, they wrote this paper, and they said they're talking about, like, that there are 6 layers. There's the physical manifestations, yeah? There's the anti-physical effects, psychological factors, physiological factors. That's oh my god, I've got an implant from the aliens, or there's a ringing in my ears the whole time, or you know what I mean. Where is it? Psychic effects and also cultural effects.
So, okay.
We're not going to get into those, but suffice to say that Kelleher says that this is a touchstone for what's going to be discussed in this book.
Okay.
Yeah? Now, honestly, it's hard to overstate what a character Vallee is in UFOs. The guy is in his 80s now.
Is he?
Yeah. And
he must be.
you can Google him doing TED Talks on quantum physics and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
As recently as a year or two ago, you know? And he's still very sprightly and very much, witted and stuff like that, yeah?
Yeah.
But, like, honestly, he's a big name in UFOs. The other guy then is Eric Davis. Now, Eric Davis is a physicist. He's a PhD in astrophysics, I think. And he's been a weird science guy for so long. He's associated with this thing called the Institute for Advanced Science, and that's based in Austin, Texas. And he's also associated with a company that's connected to them called Earth Tech International. Yeah?
Okay, yeah.
They're also based in Austin. Yeah? He's worked for them for decades. They'll come up later. Yeah?
Okay.
Trust me. So, Davis has been a purveyor of weird science for a very long time. Like, a very long time. Like, for instance, he won the Pegasus Award, which is an award...
Pegasus or Pegasus?
Pegasus.
Oh, jeez.
As in a flying pig. He won the Pegasus Award in 2004.
What is a Pegasus Award?
The Pegasus Award is an award given by the James Randi organization.
James Randi.
Do you know James Randi?
I've heard his name and giggled about it all.
James Randi was a stage magician, and he developed all these things like the James Randi Prize. Like the James Randi Prize is $1 million in cash to anyone that can prove psychic ability under scientific laboratory conditions, yeah,
okay,
with repeatable results. Yeah. And that's been running for decades and no one's ever won it. He's also, the James Randi Institute has also set up this Pegasus Award, and they give out the Pegasus Award. There's several different categories. I think Davis won it for physics this year, but it's Pegasus, yeah. And it awards...
If I can find a picture.
It awards money to publicly funded research into just ridiculous science. And the one that he won it for that year in 2004 was for the conveyance of persons by psychic means.
Conveyance of persons by psychic means.
Or the transport through extra space dimensions or parallel universes. Which was, he produced a 78-page report on it. I've actually read the abstract and first page of the report, and then it descends into mathematics, and I just gave up. And you can actually download that.
Don't blame you.
You can download that from the American government for free. Or then I was like, I wonder if Eric Davis has written any books. And I started Googling Eric Davis and books, and he did write a book about teleportation. And it was like $6 to buy a paper.
Teach you how to teleport.
No, it was literally just this paper that you can download from the Department of Defense for free. And it was literally just that with a salacious cover on it.
Mr. Davis.
I know, it's ridiculous. But look, Davis is a big name in UFOs, but not as big a name as Vallee. but he's going to make a name for himself, like.
Yeah.
And like I said, he like
with that hustle attitude.
Well, he got 25,000 for that report, and he's worked for, as I said, the Institute for Advanced
Still making
Science.
people buy it.
I'm
Sorry, I'm just trying to.
Oh
be
no,
smart.
no, no, no! It's like it's just that he's always worked in this. Like, if you want someone to look into wacky science, Davis is your man. Wacky physics, Davis is your man. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are the first two characters that we're going to talk about. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Vallee and Davis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as I said, they've written this. They've written this thing that's a touchstone, you know, and it's like that. There are cultural, psychological, physiological, but also psychic and spiritual effects to the UFO phenomenon, and they're all layered on top of each other. Yeah? And it's silly to think of them as one thing. They're all part of one phenomenon, you know?
They're not, or they are.
Yeah, they are. And that's how they're pulling together all of the threads of the original one. The poltergeist activity, the portals to a different dimension, you know what I mean?
Another dimension.
The orbs of light, but also the physical UFOs, all of these things, yeah?
Yep.
Okay. He's also... Colin Keller is also at pains to note that there was a 14-month process of the Pentagon vetting this manuscript.
This book that he wrote.
Yes, this book that we're reading.
Yes.
And that this 14 months, they were made to remove some things, and they were made to alter other things like names or details, but that they're trying to remain as true to what happened as possible. Yeah?
Okay.
So that's the crack.
Details?
What?
Are they not meant to just redact? They can't just redact. They have to
They had
remove.
They were saying that they had to submit the manuscript, and it was a 14-month process where they would be told, you cannot mention these things, you cannot mention those things. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Okay.
He did say that most of the things were people's names.
Okay.
Because he said, like, later on they'll talk about, like, not just what people saw, which the Pentagon was not as concerned about, but what people experienced, you know, psychically and physically, and that there was concern around health records and stuff like that. But part of what Keller is saying is that, you know, they didn't get to publish it the last time, and now they're going to go into all of the different elements of it. And as a touchstone on this, they're using this kind of famous UFO paper, I guess, that was published by Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis. And Jacques Vallée is like UFO royalty, and Eric Davis is weird science guy. Yeah. Now, Vallée is like, he's a computer scientist, started in the 60s and all this. He's written books with J. Allen Hynek, the guy from Project Blue Book. And he's also, what can you say?
It's like a really reputable guy in the UFO community.
He's UFO royalty. Like, there's a character in, like, the French UFO guy in Close Encounters of the Third Kind is based on him. And, you know, that was back in the 70s. You can go and see TED Talks of him right now. Not talking about UFO stuff, but talking about different stuff like, you know, quantum physics and stuff like that. Eric Davis, then, he's a weird science guy. Like, he won a Pegasus in 2004, which is the Flying Pig Award by the James Randi Society. And he won it for a paper that he got paid $25,000 for by the Defense Intelligence Agency on the possibility of using transporter technology or psychically transporting stuff and all of these kind of things. Like, he's a weird science guy.
Yeah.
Another big name in kind of UFO kind of circles, you know? So that's what they're talking about, that like this OSAP thing is going to look into all of these different elements of it. Yeah? I guess that's it. Then the funding comes from Harry Reid, you know, through Harry Reid, who was a senator from Las Vegas. He was the former like gaming's commissioner in Nevada, which is a huge position, as you can imagine, with the amount of money that Nevada makes off gaming, you know?
Gambling, right?
Yeah, and then he became a senator, and he was a senator for decades. He was Speaker of the House for a long time. You know, it was a high position, like he was in a high political position.
Right.
And he was always interested in kind of UFO stuff. George Knapp said that he had spoken to him a couple of times on KLAS, which is a CBS affiliate, and you know, he had interviewed him a few times about like UFO stuff, and he said that he seemed not that, you know, adverse to it. So when Knapp was breaking this Lazar stuff about Area 51 and all this, like, he phones Reid and says, I want to talk to you about this story I'm going to break. And Reid said, I don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to be on my way to the airport to fly to Washington. I can meet you and, you know, we can share the ride and you can tell me what's going on. And he explained the whole thing to him, and Reid said, I'm not going to comment on anything like that, this Area 51 stuff.
Yeah.
He goes, but keep me abreast of what's going on. Yeah? And then he goes back to Washington, and Knapp kind of goes, well, I didn't get the impression he was that bad, you know, like that he was that against it. Yeah?
Right.
Then a while later, this story comes up about NASA has all these chimps, and they were sending them up into space, but the chimps had been retired, you know? And Knapp gets a hold, and they'd been retired to a science facility, like a research facility in Nevada.
Didn't they just get retired to a zoo or something? Like, or like a sanctuary?
You'd imagine, yeah. Or like, you know, they're hero chimps, like, you know.
Yeah, they've done their thing.
Like, they've done their thing.
Been imprisoned.
You just end up like somewhere where they've got like loads of bananas or something. I don't know. But they gave them to a research facility.
Banana baths every day.
Knapp got hold of a story where the chimps were being treated bad, like they were having research done on them, like having shampoo put in their eyeballs or whatever, you know.
Oh my God.
And he phones up Reid and he says, look, there's these NASA chimps that are being treated badly. What do you make of that? And Reid says, well, why don't you fly out to Washington and I'll give you, you know, like a soundbite. And when Knapp arrives, Reid has also got his buddy John Glenn, who's a former astronaut.
Yeah.
And he's also got him, and John Glenn is riled up about it because he genuinely thinks that these chimps shouldn't be treated badly, and then that's what happens. He interviews Reid and Glenn about it, and then it causes a furore, I guess.
Yeah.
And NASA has the research in whatchamacallit institute, puts pressure on them, and they actually retire the chimps, take them out of rotation or whatever it is.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I guess that's an interesting side of the story. Reid as well says that his interest, because he's a convert to Mormonism, and that his interest in UFOs comes that, I mean, I don't know anything about Mormon theology or anything like that, but that they believe in other worlds, and that made it possible for him to believe in UFOs and all this kind of thing. Okay. But he's a major player in it. Like, he's the guy that gets the funding for it. Yeah?
Yeah.
So then, I guess, do you want to talk about, like, the guys that are on the board? Like, there's all these... We talked about Vallee already. He's UFO royalty, yeah? There's this other guy, Hal Puthoff. He has been pulling down CIA... DIA research money for weird science since the 70s. Okay. He ran a project called Project Stargate, and that's a remote viewing project. Okay. There's another guy on the board called John Alexander. John Alexander worked in the DIA as well. He worked on... Do you know that movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats? Yeah. With George Clooney and stuff? Yeah, that's based on his work, on John Alexander's work. A guy wrote a book about him. John Ronson, a Welsh guy, wrote a book about him. And yeah, basically that movie is like a fictionalized version of his work. But it was all that kind of stuff, like psychic spy stuff and all this kind of thing, you know?
Mm.
He's also a thing called, he sees himself as a thanatologist.
A what now?
A thanatologist. There's this character in Greek mythology, Thanatos, who is the personification of death. And thanatologists, they study death and what happens after death and stuff like that.
Weird. Sorry, I'm going back in my ancient Greek lore brain.
Yeah.
From when I studied in uni. And is it Thanos?
It's not Thanos. It's Thanatos with a T. Thanatos. Yeah, with a T, with another T at the end. But it's very close to Thanos.
Yeah, no, Thanos is
not
the god of war.
Not a coincidence, I would imagine. Not a coincidence.
Thanos is the god of war. Thanatos. Interesting. I feel like
is Thanos the god of war?
Yeah.
I was associating it with the Marvel movie or whatever.
Well, I'm basing it on the video game.
Yeah.
Great video game.
other famous people involved that are on this board is a guy called John Mack. Do you remember John Mack was do you remember the Ariel School? Do you remember where the kids in Zimbabwe saw the...
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and he's the scientist, he's the guy that shows up, he's a Harvard professor of psychiatry, and he shows up to interview the kids.
Oh, okay.
And he's written books about people with the, like the abduction phenomenon.
Yes.
And stuff like that. So that's another massive name, you know? Mm. There's also a guy called Harrison Schmitt. Harrison Schmitt is a former astronaut. Mm-hmm. And he's actually the only civilian to ever walk on the moon.
Oh.
Like he's...
until recently, right?
What do you mean?
Oh, no, wait. I'm thinking of something else. Did you know that one of the first women... There was a group of women in the 60s who were not allowed to become astronauts that were sent into space.
Yeah.
But they did study. But they had these sexist laws that prevented them from going actually into an aircraft until the 80s.
Really?
Yes. One woman from that original team, they're like engineers.
Yeah.
They're superheroes, super women. One of the original people who was denied being an astronaut for space was just within the last few years.
Yeah.
She was allowed to go to space.
Wally
and
Funk.
she did like a few laps of the Earth, I think. If I remember that correctly. She didn't like go and land on the moon or something because she was 80 years old.
Yeah, this is Wally Funk.
Is that Wally Funk?
That's her name, yeah.
Okay.
It's such a weird name, but yeah, that's the lady's name.
Okay, because I saw a TikTok. I saw a TikTok the other night.
It is so bizarre, isn't it?
Just, yeah.
Incredible. She was up there because it was actually on Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos's space-based vanity project that sent her up.
Yeah.
And right after her, they sent up William Shatner. And William Shatner ended up being the oldest person in space.
Right.
But you know who the oldest person in space before that was? John Glenn. The astronaut with the monkeys. The senator, John Glenn. He went up when he was like 77, but he was up there for like 9 days and he was like a specialist. Like he had an actual job.
Was he on ISS or something?
No, I believe they were making a delivery to ISS, but I don't think he was ever on ISS.
Okay.
But like Shatner just literally went up and came down. Funk went up and did the rotations.
He took the elevator.
Yeah, it's basically, you know, anywhere.
Aren't they trying to make an elevator?
I mean, the space elevator is a crazy idea. Like
the space elevator theory.
Yeah, I mean, it's because in order to make it stable, it has to be 34,000 kilometers or so outside of the Earth, like, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going down the rabbit hole.
Rabbit hole.
The last person on the board here is this guy here, Harrison Schmitt. Did we talk about Harrison Schmitt? He's a geologist. He was the last one of the last people to walk on the moon, and the only civilian. Like everyone else was a member of the Navy or Air Force. You know.
This is just a scientist.
He was a senator as well for a while.
Okay.
And he's on the board. There's so many other astronauts that you could have picked, and I'm not going to go into them. And they are actually involved in this story and were paid by our friend Robert Bigelow. But let's not go into them. Have we talked about Robert Bigelow?
We talked about him at least the last time and several episodes before.
We did, yeah, but he's just basically he's a big money.
He's a rich dude who really likes space.
He really likes space. He really likes he wants to look into the UFOs because his grandparents had a UFO experience when he was younger.
Okay.
They told him about it. And he's had a lot of personal tragedy in his life. His son committed suicide in his 20s, and that's it, which was the early 90s.
Yeah.
And then his son, at the time, his son's wife was pregnant. The child that was born to that wife committed suicide when he was in his early 20s. His wife passed away in 2020. And in 2021, he announced that he was providing a $1.5 million prize for anyone that could prove life after death.
Okay.
And that's why I brought up John Alexander's, because John Alexander was one of the earliest people that NIDS employed. And he's a thanatologist. He's interested in what happens after death, philosophically, physically, psychologically.
Okay.
And I just think that the tragedy in Bigelow's life is important in all this.
Yeah, it's definitely a motivating factor.
Yeah. Now let's get into the juice. Let's get into the actual interesting stuff here.
The juice.
The exciting stuff.
Let's go.
Jim Lacatski, the G-Man, right?
Yes.
Right. Oh my God. Yeah, so many people, so much exhaustive stuff we could go into here, but Lacatski is the one where there's almost no information on, except what's in this book and this photograph that I screen captured.
Yes. He's very difficult to track down.
And there's loads of information about what happens here. But Lacatski reads the Skinwalker at the Pentagon book, right?
Okay.
And
the book we're reading right now.
Yeah. And he discusses it with a friend of his.
Okay.
Yeah, called Jonathan Axelrod, right? Don't worry about Jonathan Axelrod.
We won't.
He discusses it with his friend, right?
Yeah.
And his friend is very dubious about it. Yeah?
Right.
And Lacatski's like, no, man, I really love it. It's really, really cool, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then he writes a letter to Bigelow and goes, I'm really interested in this. I've read the book. I think there's a lot of stuff in here that the DIA, who he works for, would be interested in. Bobby Bigelow says, no problem. Come on out.
Mm-hmm.
So he flies out. Wait till you hear the timescales involved here. He flies out to Vernal, Utah, right?
Okay.
I love that name, Vernal. It's so cool. It's like spring or something. He flies out to Vernal, Utah, right? Mm-hmm. He gets off of a plane and gets into a car with Bigelow, and they drive down to Skinwalker Ranch. Yeah?
Okay.
They get to Skinwalker Ranch, and Bigelow introduces them to the people that are staying on the ranch and says, this is my friend Lacatski, and we're going to just hang out and chill out. And they're in there, and they're inside in the house, and they're talking to the people about what they've seen and experienced in the at the ranch.
Yeah.
The people are saying, oh, you know, I've seen this and I've seen... And then Lacatski looks over the shoulder, like they're sitting in the living room, and he looks over the shoulder into the kitchen, and there's this glowing yellow pool noodle floating in air.
What?
Yeah, there's a glowing yellow pool noodle.
Okay.
Do you know?
Is it moving? I mean, your hands are moving.
It's kind of undulating, and like it's going around itself.
It's undulating, not pulsing.
Do you know a triangle?
Yeah.
Do you know like in a
musical instrument?
Yeah, the triangle. It's basically like a triangle, but it's not connected. It's like Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells. He actually literally describes it as that, Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells. And it's like, it's going around, keeping the triangle, but like moving around and thing. And he's watching it for about like 30 seconds. And then it just disappears. And it goes from not so solid to more solid and then not so solid. Yeah?
Wow.
And
Did somebody spike his drink?
I have no idea. And he says that they sat there and they were talking to the two people, Juan and Tina Diaz, I think. And they were talking to them for a while. And, oh yeah, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. Thank you for your time. And then they get back in the car and they're driving back to get the plane. He's going to fly back to Washington, you know? Mm-hmm. And this whole event takes 2 hours. He's literally on the ranch for a half an hour. Like, they come down, they have a quick chat with the people that are living there.
Yeah.
And then they fly. He goes back to Vernal to the airport to fly out.
In 2 hours. So
yeah.
The whole thing
and he said, like, the whole way back in the car, you know, Robert Bigelow was explaining this and that to me and telling me about this and that. And I was just like going, certainly. Sounds good. Quite right, Bob. Quite right. You know what I mean?
Oh my God.
So he goes back to Washington and he's just like, oh my giddy aunt, and starts furiously writing documents about what they're going to look into and what they're going to research and all this kind of racket, yeah?
Okay.
And that's it. He writes a proposal document and sends it up the line. The guys up the line say, yeah, move ahead with this, you know? And his document's like, oh, we're going to look into like advanced aerospace technology stuff, you know? Mm-hmm. And then they go, yeah, you're cleared to write a tender document and have people tender for this, you know? So he writes the tender document and they put it out. And after whatever it is, the only people to apply for it is Bigelow Aerospace. Meanwhile, Bigelow has got onto Harry Reid, or told Lacatski maybe to get onto Harry Reid, and they've all started talking to each other, and then the contract gets assigned to Bigelow Aerospace, this newly formed entity within Bigelow Aerospace, the BAS unit.
The BAS unit.
Yeah. And also, Cullum Kelleher had been in NIDS because of the original, and Davis and the whole lot of them had been in NIDS because of the original thing.
Yeah.
And then they basically had been laid off at the end of the Skinwalker stuff. And now they're back. They're back in the game.
Ooh.
Right.
I just realized I can't see where I'm. There we go. Okay.
All right. So here we go with the meat and potatoes.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Lacatski gets the money. They get the money. They get the 10 million. They start rolling. Yeah? Mm-hmm. They're hiring people left, right and centre. I think Kelleher said that by the end of the first 6 months, because he was in charge of the program, by the end of the first 6 months that they had about maybe 50 or 60 scientists working on various different projects. It's wide ranging as well. Like, I know you told me to cut this down, but the stuff that they're supposed to be looking into is so wide ranging. Warp drives, teleportation, psychic effects. It's wacky, like.
It's like covering everything.
It covers, but everything, the kitchen sink, the whole lot. And so he's saying we've got 50 scientists working hardcore on it, you know, after about 6 months. And then they've got about a couple of hundred people in the field and they're collecting data and like recording stuff, you know. As part of this, and this is where it ties back to Lacatski. Lacatski gets onto his friend. Do you remember Jonathan Axelrod? Yeah. That I was talking about. Jonathan Axelrod is he's associated with the Air Force, you know? And he's down, like, basically, Lacatski gets onto Axelrod. And Axelrod is like, Lacatski, what's up? He goes, man, I am really enjoying that Skinwalker book. I've actually read it. He's based in the Green Zone in Iraq at that time. Like, he's stationed there. And he said, man, I've given it to my buddies. Half of them have read it already. The other half are like, what's this book? He goes, it's like the biggest hit around the Green Zone down in Iraq. Like, they're all reading the book. They're loving it. It's such entertainment. And I don't blame them either. It is a very entertaining book, you know? And Lacatski goes, listen, Jonathan, I got a job for you, man. I need you to go with your sensor expertise. I need you to go to this place in Utah and check it out. You know?
Okay.
And this is either right before or right after the contract is signed. I did not take scrupulous enough notes. But so Jonathan ends up there himself with two of his friends from the Marines. Mm-hmm. Does this story start to sound familiar?
Yep.
So this is the one. This is the story where they meet the entity. Where they're down there, because they're all specialists in the armed forces in like sensor technology.
Yeah.
And they've got like the whatchamacallit, like the infrared goggles. And they start heading down the pathway and they see this huge black orb, you know? And it gets technical as well. It's like if it's not visible in visible light because there was no light because it was a moonless dark night, you know? But it's visible in infrared, but it's just a big black sphere, which means it's in the visible thing but not in infrared or something. But either way, there's something there and it's just a big oval sphere about 6 feet across, just floating in the front. And as they start to move forward, you remember all these different effects? They all start to get this psychological effect where they are absolutely bricking it.
Yeah.
Like there is fear coursing through them, adrenaline. They're using all their like military training to control themselves, you know?
Yeah.
And then they just eventually, when they're like within 50 meters of it, they're like, okay, we better go back to the cabin or whatever. And they go back and they even say stuff like that. You know, your man Axelrod says like that like a kind of mental fog and stuff like that, you know, had cleared, and that, you know, it was only later when they were all talking about just how frightened they were, even though they had been trained not to be frightened. Like, you don't know what this is. It's just a black thing. What is it? You know, that kind of way?
Yeah.
Like, but anyway, so that's the story, right? Except that's not where it ends, Rachel.
Oh.
No.
No?
No. Axelrod phones up Lacatski and explains what's happened. And Lacatski's gone, I really appreciate that, Jonathan. Thanks very much. And then he flies back to his house in Virginia, right? Where his wife and his 2 kids are. And he spends a few days there, R&R, and then he's back to Iraq, back to the Green Zone. Yeah?
Yeah.
That's grand. Except... Oh, I got some stuff here.
Are there pictures?
There are no pictures in this book, unfortunately.
What?
Yeah, I know. We'll actually get into that later. So Axelrod's wife is she's in bed one night, yeah, and she kind of wakes up, and she sees this dark, unearthly figure standing on the other side of the room. And she kind of startles up like that, you know?
Yeah.
And the figure starts to walk towards her. And she's like, what in the... And turns on the light. Nothing. She's a bit shook. But she's cool enough, and she's like, oh, I must have been half in a dream, or... I don't know. She turns off the light. And then... out in the landing. She's like, what the? She goes out. Nothing. She's like, oh, God, I need to get more sleep. Shouldn't have had all that cheese. And she goes back to bed. And then downstairs in the kitchen, just like that. And she goes and investigates. Nothing. And this pattern just kind of repeats itself for weeks and weeks on end. One night she hears an almighty roar from across the hall. She runs into her son's room, and he's in there, and he's got this terrible story about these glowing orbs that have been appearing in his room.
Okay.
And flying all around the room, left and right and up and down, and they seem to be flying in patterns, you know? Like all like going around and rotating but maintaining the same distance from each other, and etc. And every time he looks at them, they fly right all up into his face. Do you know?
Right.
And he's just, this has been going on for a while, like, and he's really upset by it. And he says that one night he looked at them and he just like shouted like, "Go away," in his head, and whoosh, right up into his face. And that's when he screamed, like. So she's there. She doesn't know what to do. She doesn't want to bother Jonathan, like he's over in a war zone, like being very busy or whatever, you know what I mean? So she phones him up and she explains what's going on. And I don't even know. I thought I was just tired or worn out or what, like, but I've been seeing this shadowy figure or whatever, and it appears all the time, and sometimes I turn around and it's behind me in the darkness, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, geez, that's really upsetting, like, that's weird, like, but, that's weird. So then about a week later, she's down in the living room, you know?
Mm-hmm.
She's like, oh God, this TV show is getting better and better. I'm going to go to bed anyway. That was a great episode. And she goes into the kitchen and she fills herself a glass of water, you know? And she walks over. She's walking out of the kitchen and she turns off the light. And just out of the corner of her eye, she sees something in the yard. You know the way you can't see out of a room when it's lit at night?
Right.
But when she turns off the light, she sees something out of the corner of her eye. And she looks over. And there at the end of the property is this dark figure standing with its hand on the post of the fence. And she goes over to the window and she's looking at it. Those are very pointy ears. And there it is. A wolf, a giant wolf standing on two legs with its paw on the edge of the fence. And she looks at it for minutes on end, like literally looking at it in the darkness. And she's looking at its face and it looks very annoyed.
So handsome, no.
But you know these...
I know how this novel goes.
Yeah. This is a tall, dark and handsome wolf, is it?
You clearly haven't been in the fantasy realm for very long.
Not that corner of the fantasy realm. Oh, I've actually got a note here that goes, the horror.
Right.
Hang on.
Hold on, start over so you can.
So she's looking at it
Is this the same wolf from before?
I imagine it is. And the wolf is standing on two legs,
right,
you know?
Right.
And she's looking at it and she says that she's like standing in the window with the glass of water in her hand, just looking at it for minutes on end and like really focusing on it and not really understanding what she's actually looking at, you know?
Right.
And she said that it looked really angry and, you know, it had flashing angry eyes and all this kind of stuff. You
Not
know?
sexy. Got it.
No, this is not Heathcliff.
What?
No. You know. Heathcliff.
Oh.
Wuthering Heights, you know?
No, sorry. My brain went immediately to the cartoon character Heathcliff.
Is there a Heathcliff character?
Yeah, it's a cat.
All right. Oh, Heathcliff the cat. Yeah. No. This is an angry werewolf kind of character. And then the werewolf gets sick of looking at her and just turns tail and walks very slowly up the incline and into the tree line of the cusp of trees that's at the top of the hill.
Mm-hmm.
And she said like it wasn't in a rush or anything, it just walked. And then she was like, okay.
Sauntered. That's
definitely something. That's a thing. That's definitely a thing.
He wants you to follow him, Barbara.
And she's like, I might actually be going mad here. I don't know what's going on. And she went to bed. And then the next day she comes home from work. And they have two kids, like two teenage sons, you know. Mm-hmm. And when she comes home, the two teenage sons are really agitated. And they said like that they'd come back from school and they'd made something to eat. And then they had gone, they were like, oh, let's like hang out in the living room or whatever. When they were in the living room, they heard a noise outside. And they looked out the window. And you're not going to believe this, Mom. There was a giant wolf creature at the end of the yard. And she's like, a giant wolf creature? You don't say. So anyway, in this case, the giant wolf creature was eyeballing the lads, like. And,
You're making noise.
oh, sorry.
Quit it.
The giant wolf creature was eyeballing the lads, like. And...
Like, tasty or like...
Like, I think it was the same way it was looking at her with kind of malevolence and stuff like that, you know? And that she said she knew that this was the thing that she had seen, yeah? So she was like, oh, don't be ridiculous, so as not to worry them.
Right.
And then phoned Jonathan and was like, I cannot explain this, but you remember the Dark Shadow thing? No, there's a wolf man. I've seen it. The two kids have seen it. Like, something's going on here. So he's like, okay, I guess I better come back and sort it out, you know? They came back. He comes back, and it takes about a week for him to come back because, you know, he's got to, like, apply for leave and stuff like this.
By that time, she's pregnant with the wolf baby. Sorry, I just can't.
You're terrible, Muriel.
It's Barbara!
So when Jonathan Axelrod arrives home, you know, and as I said, the mom was playing it cool with the kids so as not to panic them, you know.
Right.
He goes in and he's like, "Hey, your mom told me about this wolf thing," you know, and they had been researching it, and they had like loads of stories about wolfmen in Virginia and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And to be honest, Virginia is a hotspot for for dogmen, you know, and all this, if you know what I mean.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
La la. So he's like, oh, come here, we gotta stop this, like, you know. So he's like, come on, guys, put on your boots. We're going for a walk, you know. And he takes them out.
Bring my silverware.
Yeah, he's gonna like. He should definitely bring some silverware. He's gonna bring him out and show him that this wolf man doesn't exist, you know. Or this dog man or whatever. And they go down the end of the yard and he's going, so you say he was standing right here, right over here by this fence? Ooh. And there's claw marks all on the fence post. And then they walk in and the kids are like, well, he ran up into the tree line right there. So they go up to the cusp of trees.
Yeah.
And there's trees up there that have like claw marks all down them from like 8 or 9 feet up. You know?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't a wolf or a bear or whatever, you know what I mean?
Big old scratching post.
I mean, do you get bears in suburban?
We have cougars.
Cougars, all right. Well, a cougar could have done that.
Mountain lion. Cougar.
I guess a cougar could have done that. But that's the crack, like. And I think what they're at pains to mention here is that this is the hitchhiker effect, which I think is going to be a big part of this book. Which is where something unusual happens to you, you know, inexplicable or psychic or whatever. And then you go home and it hitchhikes on you. And then you've got a poltergeist in your house, or you're hearing footsteps, or wolfmen are coming for you, you know? Like in this case, it was Lacatski said it to Axelrod, gave him a job. He went and did the job. He got into some trouble. And when he came back, his family, who had never been anywhere like within 2,000 miles of this place, they started experiencing this. Like he came back and hung around for a week and then went back on service.
Yeah.
And then they're the ones that are experiencing this thing. Now, I think we've got through all the people. And I think from now on, it's just going to be absolute banana stories.
Cool.
From what I've been hearing as well, do you remember we were talking about that Frog Ranch, whatever it was called, something Frog Ranch before?
Frog Ranch?
Yeah, it's like Frog Lake Ranch or something. It's supposed to be close to this one, the Skinwalker one, and it's supposed to have wacky stories, you know?
I don't recall, but I believe you.
They've hinted at an awful lot of stuff in this. They've hinted that they looked into those black triangle UFOs. They've hinted that they're going to have loads of cryptids that they couldn't talk about before, but now they can talk about. They've hinted that. Do you remember when I was telling you about in Skinwalker Ranch, the original one, where they go to Washington State and there's that family that have the really weird experiences where there's like a spotlight that turns on and it just shines on one of them in the middle of the night, like, you know, and all of these weird experiences they were having. The window stuff, you know, where there's things banging on the window, and I don't remember the details of it now, but they hint that they're gonna give you the full dirt on that as well.
Okay, but we're at Frog Lake. Yeah,
look, we're through the tough part of this, where we talk about all of these people, like.
Please reference the PDF.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
If you need help or if you forget who they are, go check out the link down below.
Well, yeah. I've made. I mean, red string not included. You can get your own red string for this, like, and if I mean, like, I just assumed
somewhere.
I just assumed that anyone that's watching your channel actually has several different kinds of.
Is that red enough?
Anything at all. I just assumed that anyone that's watching your channel would have like so many options for red string.
Oh, absolutely.
They're like going, wait, does twine work? Do you know?
No, we literally have yarn.
Yarn. I could use yarn, silk.
Red.
I've got this cotton mix.
Yeah. Alpaca.
I've got some alpaca.
Oh, I do have red alpaca, actually.
I feel like alpaca would, you know, with the fuzziness of it, would work on. But
make it stand out a bit.
I mean, I didn't even get into all of the weird connections between all of these guys. Like, but what this is it's an ecosystem.
Yes.
You know, and like, this is original flavor UFO guys.
Are you saying that weird breeds weird?
Yeah, and it's an ecosystem, and like the podcasting craze has made this so accessible and so easy for all of these space guys to get their space knowledge out there. You know what I mean? And I mean, I didn't even talk about any of the connections because I know that it would have melted your brain, like, but like Hal Puthoff is in his 80s. Jacques Vallée is in his 80s. John Alexander is in his 80s.
Yeah.
Robert Bigelow is 76. Harry Reid is dead. Jim Lacatski looks like he's got long for this world.
Jim. I don't know. I'd be worried.
Younger people involved in this thing are like Colm Kelleher, Eric Davis, George Knapp, like, but there's like a lot of these people. This is the old UFO guard. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And like the new UFO guard as well. Like Hal Puthoff was on the board for To the Stars Academy with Tom DeLonge and stuff. Do you know what I mean? Eric Davis has done work with them.
And what will we expect in the next episode of Skinwalker at the Pentagon?
I don't know, because I actually haven't read on, but I think that what they're going to talk about next is like that they're going to give you the real skinny about what happened in the first book. Do you know? But this time it won't be. They're going to add more information. Like I said, I've listened to a couple of podcasts where like people involved in this have said, oh yeah, well, you know, and then they've told a story and you're like, well, that sounds like a story from the first book, but with loads of added elements. And I think that that's going to happen. And I think they're going to have loads of other stuff.
Okay.
But I think that what we're going to see is just more of this, as we were talking about earlier, like this high strangeness, this 6-layered psychological effect, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where it's like going to be poltergeist activity and orbs and all, you know, all of this weird stuff happening all at once.
Yeah.
And you know, and then you're like, you run around the back of the barn to get away from them, and Sasquatch is there and he's like smoking a cigarette and he's like, I'm on a union break. You know what I mean? I can't legally appear for 5 minutes.
My wife really doesn't like it when I do this at home.
Yeah. Don't tell my wife I'm smoking.
Daddy, what's that?
Get out of here, Sasquatch. What was do you know my favorite story from the original one was the UFO that landed in the yard, and she was looking out the window and there was a guy in front of it at a desk and he seemed to be doing paperwork.
With the suitcase?
Yeah! Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And he seemed to be doing paperwork, and then he eventually was like, okay, well, that's enough of that, time to clock off, and he turns off the machine and puts the papers in the thing.
We're talking about an alien.
Yeah, an alien, yeah. And he starts walking towards the door. I thought that was so cool, brilliant. Man. That was so cool. And I love the stuff in expect more of that. That's basically
that's where we're going.
Yeah, but I expect this to be a lot more weirder, and I think that we're actually at the end of how
explaining relationships between scientists.
Well, you don't want to hear that, so we're not going to have any of that. But I think that we're at the end of the Pentagon thing. Skinwalkers at the Pentagon basically is saying, we got some Pentagon money to get it back and going. Ah, sap! Do you know? I think that's what's going on here, because I thought that they were going to be talking about and then real deep conspiracy stuff,
Yeah.
But that's not what's happening here.
Well.
Anyway, thanks for your time and patience.
Thank you for relaying all of that book to us. Tune in next time. It may be next week or it might be the week after, depending. But if it's not on next Tuesday, then you'll see it the Tuesday after. Thank you for tuning in and watching us. And if you have any questions or comments or anything that you'd like to tell us, please leave a comment down in the comment section below. And we will see you next time. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.